gentlemen, welcome to the very first debate session or discussion session on a variety of subjects, primarily questions that you want to ask and be answered for the very first Muslim Writers Festival that we're having here, part of Egypt this year. And I just want to introduce you to a number of our special guests that are here. Standing on my immediate right, Randa Abdul Fattah is the internationally award-winning author of over 8 novels, including Does My Head Look Big in This and No Sex in the City. Randa is a lawyer, current PhD student, candidate in sociology, and regular contributor to the Australian and international print media. Her books are taught in schools and universities around the world, and she's about to release a 4-book low fantasy series for upper primary readers. Randa Abdul Fattah. Next to her is Amal Awad, is a Sydney-based writer and author. She graduated university with an arts law degree, practiced very briefly as a lawyer, and now works as a journalist. Her first novel, Courting Samira, was published last year. She's a regular contributor to The Vine and Daily Life and has a weekly column on Aquila Style. Amal Awad. Zohab sent me his bio last night and I didn't get it. But Zohab is a spoken word poet. He does a bit of slam poetry. He's worked with the best in the business. He's a New South Wales poetry champion currently, and he will entertain you with some of his poetry plus answer some of our questions. Zohab. And at the end is our local boy, Dr. Halim Rain, is a senior lecturer in Islamic Studies at the Griffith University. His research interests include the Israel-Palestine conflict, political Islam and the representations of Muslims in the media. Dr. Rain is the author of numerous publications, including 4 books, Making Australian Foreign Policy on Israel-Palestine, Islam and Contemporary Civilization, Islam and the Australian News Media, and Reconstructing Jihad Amid Competing International Norms. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Halim Rain. It's all being taped, so there'll be audio and voice and cameras and that, so bear with us if we have to make some adjustments. Before we start, I think Zohab wants to start off with a poetry recital. Do you call them recitals? Do you slam poets?
Let's call it a slam. Yeah.
A slam, there you go. Welcome Zohab with Poetry Slam.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Zohab. I'm a spoken word poet. Let's just get straight into it. I'm going to do a quick little poem for you guys. This is something I wrote last year, around this time. It was the start of Ramadan, and there's 2 words that always come up every Ramadan at the start of it, and that's what this poem's about. Moon sightings. Moon sightings. Every year I hear the same fighting over moon sightings, the same backbiting. Shh, it's not gonna lie. Or I'll admit it, I think it's a little exciting watching full-blown arguments igniting bearded men shouting straight up doubting the sighting of the moon sightings. Oh brother, don't we follow the same religious rioting? Then why the mosque on mosque fighting? Because, brother, Saudi say they saw it today. Halas Johnny. But I called my family in Pakistan and they said, it's not today. Taraweeh will wait another day. I'm a simple slave, too much moon talk and you confuse me, too much politics and you lose me. Can't you see all I really want to be is a Muslim? Because when I put my head to the ground I don't hear a sound, there's no talk of moon sightings or intercity fighting, there's just my supplication, my dedication, my prostration for his glorification. Subhanallah. That's why focus upon the moon when it's clear to see that Allah has given us the whole galaxy. Thank you.
I thought those arguments only happened in Brisbane. They happen everywhere.
Everywhere.
Moon sightings. Great. I love it today.
Nice one, that was good.
Thank you, Zohab. Today's first panel is about writing about today's Muslims, and I'm going to throw it out there. Do Muslims want to be written about, Randa? Do Muslims want to be written about? Yes, definitely. I think that when I speak to people in the community, especially to young Muslims, at schools, at community events, there's a real longing to
have their stories told, but in their own voices, to give them a platform to see, because Muslims are often written about, they're the story, but they're not the narrators. So I think there's a real desire to be able to tell your own story, but not necessarily just a story about being a Muslim, not just the fact that Muslim is an issue, but the freedom to write about any sort of topic, and the fact that you're a Muslim being something that the story doesn't depend on that.
Well, how about you? Are you finding, I know that you put the word out, that you're looking for clients or for storytellers or whatever, what sort of response do you get? Do Muslims want their story told?
Yes, as long as it's exactly as they want it told. I think that the issue is an absence of our narrative. So what we want is to communicate our experiences, but we get frustrated when only a portion of it matches our personal experience. So I think that we've got to learn to take it less personally and realise that if you want a story told, you have to tell it yourself. And it's that simple. There's no complete Muslim experience that I can tell or Rhonda can tell, because it's only going to apply to my understanding of the world I live in, and it's going to affect some people and other people won't relate to it.
So, in your poetry slam, it seems to be sort of the way that the younger folk communicate these days. How receptive are your poetry slams amongst the wider audience? Primarily because I assume that you tell your story in it, which is a Muslim story.
Absolutely. With poetry, you're expressing yourself essentially with your own story and what you have to show the entire world. And I just happen to be Muslim, so I'm going to be expressing myself and my own identity. And it's just a happy coincidence that I am a Muslim and I've got that to tell people. So.
There must be a richness in the Muslim tradition that you can
Oh, we're very good poets.
Good ones and bad ones.
Absolutely.
Helene, you write a lot about Israel and Palestine. I don't want to spend the whole afternoon on it, but certainly with the studies that you do in the Israel-Palestine issue, there's obviously a gap. The Palestinian story hasn't been told, the Muslim story hasn't been told. We hear the Jewish story and the Zionist story. What's been your experience about telling the Muslim story, and how receptive is that?
Well, the interesting thing is that if we take the Australian media, for example, and what it has to say about this issue or others, we'll find that it doesn't really provide a complete picture. There's an absence of context. But given that on average there's 2 articles a day that come out in the Australian press about this issue, and this is over a 20-year period, it trickles through. And people get a sense of what's going on in that particular context, and they get a sense of the right and wrong involved there. And, to my surprise, a majority of Australians actually identify with the Palestinian narrative of the context of the conflict. They may not understand all the details and the complexities, but they know they can really appreciate that the Palestinian people have been wronged. And so that Muslim, the Palestinian narrative is coming through, and people do understand it.
Are they looking at it that the Palestinians have been wronged as a people, or are they subconsciously aware that these people are Muslim people? Is that a big part of the narrative?
Well, I think that, I think the Muslim part of it probably works against Palestinians to a large extent, but there are many people that, can transcend that, and they see that there is a human rights issue going on here, and that really they approach it from a perspective of universal values. If this was me in this situation, would I tolerate it for me and my family? And the answer is no. And so they say it's wrong and needs to change.
Rhonda, you've also done a lot of work in the Israel-Palestine discussion. What sort of experiences have you had telling the other side of the story?
I've seen a real change, and things are improving. I remember when I first started writing as a Palestinian about these issues, it was very difficult to get anybody in a newspaper to even respond to my emails. And it was, if I did have something in the paper, it was on the basis that there would immediately be a Jewish response. And so it was always as though the issues were on an equal footing, rather than it being an issue of a person speaking on behalf of the oppressed. It was more, these are 2 equal sides who have legitimate and valid and equal stories and cases to tell. And I think that's changing now. I used to really struggle and argue with journalists who would always presume that any position that was made on behalf of a Palestinian had to immediately be weighed or balanced with a Jewish opinion. And I think things are really changing now. I'm getting a lot more opportunities to write about Palestine and to speak about Palestine. I think there's a huge, like I said, a real shift, and people are actually recognising this as a human rights issue. And I don't know if you agree, I think it also reflects the shift in the human rights activism amongst Palestinians, so that it's not necessarily just the language has changed in our activism, and we've really been able to take this as a human rights issue, and I think that universalises our message and our cause, and people are more easily able to relate to it.
So Palestinians are telling their own stories?
Oh, definitely, and I think the arts has been a really amazing avenue for Palestinians to be able to actually show what happens when you live under occupation, whether that's in film or books or poetry.
So can you do, I mean, poetry, we talk about poetry being serene and beautiful and the words are lyrical and it's supposed to be soothing. But when you come across war and terror and all those desperation, poverty and that, can you write a poem about really harsh subjects?
Of course. It seems to be all I write about. In 2011, I won the New South Wales Slam with a poem about Palestine. And it was funny, I didn't actually expect to win, and I realised that the wider secular audience do respond to the Palestinian cause, because they realise it's such an important thing, and it's human traits that we all share. So absolutely you can write about dark, depressing, bad aspects of the world, and I think it's very important that we do so, with poetry especially. Even if you take the example of the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, that was inspired much by the arts movement within Tehran. So I think the arts have such a strong influence on things like political movements, and absolutely we should be writing a lot more about things like Palestine and any injustice we do see in the world.
Are they underground arts? I mean, we don't normally as a Muslim community celebrate arts as much as we should. And a lot of the times it's underground. It's sort of like, oh, well, let's do this. Oh, let's do some calligraphy as well. It's like a byproduct or an added thing. What were you thinking about underground arts, or are they just being subversive? Or because arts people and creative people have always tended to be a little bit more outspoken and a little bit more against the current government and...
That's just Brisbane, I think.
I'm sure it's not just Brisbane.
The conservative regime that rules the Muslim community in Brisbane is what keeps art,
I want to actually say on a serious note, I think that we're looking at this from the Australian perspective. If you go to the Middle East, and I'm sure other countries, there's such a vibrant community of artists, writers, poets. I'm always amazed when I go to the Middle East, just how active they are in that area, and we just don't see it here. Yes, I believe so. I think, especially in, say, Lebanon, Jordan, I've read a lot about the underground, Saudi Arabia. You have to be underground in Saudi Arabia. But in Jordan, museums and a lot of art courses and calligraphy. And beyond calligraphy, this is the other thing. It's not just calligraphy. It's really, really expressive nations of people. So
I also I ran writing workshops in Ramallah and Jerusalem, and by video link to Gaza when I was in Palestine 2 years ago, and I found that the art scene there, the writing scene, was so much more subversive. I find that Australian Muslims, more than Australian Palestinians, but I feel that we're more conservative.
We're very safe.
Yeah, we're very safe, we're more conservative, and that there's a real daring quality to the art that's being produced in these countries. I find that quite ironic. It must have something to do with identity politics and
they're trying to make change, right?
Yeah, they're trying to make change, and I think the motivation is different, but that for me was a real eye-opener.
Did you find that too, Helene, you went over to Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, I visit many countries around the Muslim world, and I mean, to look at it from a historical perspective, music, poetry, various other forms of artistic expression have always been part of Islamic civilization, and it's really a modern phenomenon that certain groups or regimes or ideologies have tried to suppress that. But it's, it's resurrecting, and, it's becoming part of Islamic civilization once again, I think.
So I'm just intrigued as to where does that suppression come from? Why are we so ultra-conservative here as opposed to in Muslim countries?
Well, I think it's got to do with our identity. I think that people have struggled to sort of come to terms with the fact that you can be an Australian and a Muslim at the same time, and people have convinced others that that you can't be. You have to be, a Muslim like this that's stripped of, any culture that resembles what the Western world has to offer. And anytime there's an overlap, well, it has to be removed, and we leave this very dry, rigid, conservative version of Islam that I don't think is reflective of what Islam has been throughout its 1500 years.
You've written a number of books on Israel, Palestine. How easy or difficult is it to get a book written about Palestine?
Melbourne University publishing has been pretty good. Abdullah Saeed's over there in the crowd. They've been all right. But look, I'll tell you what was difficult was doing the national survey to find out what Australians really think about the Israel-Palestine conflict. We went to AC Nielsen and Roy Morgan and all those big ones, and they refused to do the survey. Once they looked at the questions that we were asking, they said that they didn't want to field it. And no amount of money was, I wasn't going to pay a huge amount of money anyway, but I just wanted to test the waters with them. And yeah, they would not accept any amount of money to do it. And when I asked them, look, off the record, I'm putting it on the record now, but when I said to them, look, off the record, why? And their answer was, well, we feel like the responses might be like this, and there'll be some negative backlash that we're not, willing to accept.
So they're willing to field who the sexist politicians, but they couldn't go that far.
And the bottom line of the book that we wrote as a consequence of that is that the pro-Israel lobby in Australia dictates a lot to not only the media but also politicians.
So how hard is it then to get the Palestinian voice heard?
Look,
at the lobbying level.
It's difficult at the lobbying level, but I think that we have a press in Australia that does allow access for different viewpoints. I think it's mistaken to say that it's pro-Israel media in Australia. That's not true. You can see various perspectives on most issues in the Australian press, including the Israel-Palestine issue. It's just a matter of how organised groups want to be and how active they want to be in getting their point put across. But there are no restrictions there. But as far as politicians go, yeah, it's difficult. Politicians have a range of concerns, including funding, being smeared in the press or negative publicity, and they run a mile if they sense that that's going to be a consequence.
If anyone in the audience wants to ask a question, please, you're welcome to do so. Now, when you're talking to young girls and they're telling you about their Muslim story, are they talking about everything? Do they talk about arranged marriages? Are they talking about cultural bias? Are they talking about I just don't fit in? What sort of stories are they telling you?
Well, it's not like I go out and sort of talk to them and then try and get ideas. With my first two novels, which were grounded in Australian Muslim identity and experience growing up in Australia, they were very much based on my own life and the lives of the people I was observing around me. But it's only afterwards when young girls who have read the book speak to me that I feel like those stories are validating their experiences. And like Emma said, there's an absence of our narrative. I always like to think of it as Muslim stories in the plural, because very often journalists and the media and reviewers can make a mistake of thinking this is the definitive Muslim experience, and you've lost right there, because the whole point is to show the nuance and variety, diversity and complexity of Muslim communities, like all other communities, and this is just one girl's experience of growing up as an Australian Muslim. But I think for me it was about trying to get beyond the hijab, beyond the label of Muslim, and show that these are universal stories of adolescents, maybe because I write for young adults, that young teenage girls who happen to be Muslim are still going through the same issues as other teenagers are. Albeit there might not be exactly the same experiences, but adolescence generally affects people in very similar ways, and so it just happens that they're Muslim, and that experience can make that, the angst of being a teenager and going through what you usually do as a teenager a little different. That's what I try and give voice to.
In your, like I said, it's the way that the young folk communicate today. Are they telling similar stories? Like, have you come across other slam poets from a Muslim background or ethnic backgrounds that are telling similar stories? Or
yes. The simple answer is yes. We've all got our own unique story to show, and at the moment there is a big movement with spoken word, especially in Western Sydney, that's just popped up in the last year or so, and you see a lot of Muslim poets and people diverse backgrounds, and they're sharing their own real story. And the background of Muslims are really coming out in that.
You write on Muslim issues and you write on normal everyday issues in your columns and that. Does being a Muslim give you a different, obviously gives you a different perspective, but what does it do for your writing?
It can really help it, and it can also hinder it. Insofar that there are definitely things that I'll stay away from because it's got nothing to do with Islam, but it's got something to do with me being Muslim. So I have to draw the line at certain topics. For example, I wouldn't write something about alcohol, endorsing alcohol, for example, but that doesn't bother me. I was at a panel the other night, and you were there as well, and one of the things that was coming up was how much of you being Muslim matters to how you write. And the simple answer is that I write as Amma, and so as much as I am a Muslim, it's going to be in there. But one of the articles I did recently was I did croquembouche, and I learned how to make croquembouche, and I wrote about it in a really sort of humorous way. And the only time that sort of came into it by chance was that they use alcohol, and I didn't use the alcohol for the. So it will influence your writing, but it's going to influence you as a person, and that's how when you tell a story, it's you being authentic, and therefore it's in there, but it should be seamless. It shouldn't be I'm Muslim and therefore this is why I'm saying this. It should just be something that shows through.
Helene, how can we write critically about Islam today?
Just do it, I reckon. Just do it. There'll be people who won't like it, and people who will criticise you and stuff like that. But I think that it's necessary. It needs to be done. I think there are various issues in the Muslim community, various understandings of Islam that are detrimental to the future of Muslims and the progress of Muslims in Australian society. And I think that these issues need to be raised. And the issues that Amul and Randa and others raise in their writings, I think they have to be there. And there will be some people who won't like it, but I think that all of these narratives, all of these stories and all these discussions are necessary.
So where are we going then as a Muslim community in Australia? Where are we progressing towards? I mean, we seem to think that we're 21st century Australia and we're all modern and we're all hip and whatever, but we're very conservative still in our beliefs, in our viewpoints, or we're being told to be conservative at least. So where's the future? I mean, is something going to break soon that we all sort of...
Revolution is coming. Absolutely. Inqilab, as I like to call it. Sometimes I believe, as second generation, third, fourth generation Muslim Australians, we're not even sure if we were raised as Muslims per se. As we got cultural Muslim. I was taught, don't drink alcohol, don't look at girls, and don't eat pork. That's what Muslim means, that's it. You don't follow those 3 rules, you are a Muslim. So, and if we're using those rules and we slowly don't really understand where we're coming from, I think there is a revolution coming and we'll see where that takes us.
What we do on this, and I'm not trying to trumpet what I do, but every time we write something or we perform a poem, or you're putting yourself out there for criticism because you're trying to serve a greater purpose. And I think it's very easy for people to sit at a computer and spew abuse at you because they don't agree with what you're saying. But I would like to see them get up and truly express how they feel, because this is how you change the world. You don't change the world by being negative. You change the world by creating new pathways. And the only way you can do that is to talk about where things aren't working and how we can make them work. And so that's why Randa was one of the first Muslim writers to say, well, I want to talk about the Muslim experience in high school. Nobody had done that, I don't think, anywhere in the world. And that's exceptional. And it takes courage.
Helene, you're a lecturer at Griffith University in Islamic studies. You obviously don't have a classroom full of Muslims.
No.
What's the attraction for a non-Muslim to come to your class?
Well, I think that many people these days realise that most of the students we teach, they're young, and ever since they could watch TV, they've seen Islam for the worst, on the news as a consequence of 9/11 and so on. So it's this thing that's out there that they recognise that they need to have an understanding of. They're aware that the world is becoming more globalised. And they're also aware that there's a growing Muslim population in Australia as well. So I think that part of it is to satisfy a curiosity, part of it is because they recognise that they need to develop an understanding of Islam and Muslims, and I think there's a curiosity that comes with it. The class has a good reputation among other students, and people say, look, it's a great class, you should take it, whatever, and so I think that adds to the numbers. So I think that, there's a combination of factors why students take the class. They're challenged, and it answers for them questions that they have, and they probably had for a number of years.
So what are they telling you after they graduated your class?
What are they telling me?
Yeah.
After they finish the class, people say, look, it was great, I came in with heaps of questions, and many of them then admit, look, I was personally quite critical of Muslims and Islam and so on, but you've made me understand, maybe some of the aspects of Islam they disagree with remain, but at least now they have a better understanding of Islam and Muslims. And I think that's my objective with the class. We're not doing dawah here or preaching to people, we just simply want them to have an understanding, for better or worse.
Rhonda, you also talk to school students, and they're obviously not all Muslims. What sort of reactions are you getting? They want to know what's a girl's experience wearing a hijab?
Yeah, well, when I first started speaking at schools and doing school events at Writers' Festivals, the main focus of a lot of the questions was about my Muslim identity and about Islam. And as I started writing books that sort of looked at all sorts of characters and experiences, and I really resisted the idea of being boxed into a Muslim writer. I wanted to be a writer that could write about all sorts of stories, experiences and characters, because like everyone here said, the fact that you're Muslim is incidental to sort of for me, it's the impulse of storytelling, it's the love of the actual craft of writing that drives me as a writer, not that I want to write to sell a message or to preach to my audience. The fact that I'm Muslim is just incidental to that, and for me, it's wonderful that I'm able to explore that part of my identity and gain something in helping to get people to see beyond the stereotypes. But because I've been able to write about all sorts of books now, I'm seeing a difference in the way students are responding to me. They're actually seeing me now as a writer, not just a Muslim who can speak about Islam. And so they're really wonderful sessions where we can talk about creativity, but we can also talk about Islam. We can talk about Palestine, which has gotten me in trouble a couple of times where schools haven't expected me to go in there. And for students to be so enthusiastic about wanting to know more about Palestine, for me, when I walk into schools and I speak to teachers and students about Palestine in particular, I am amazed at the overwhelming majority of students and teachers are thirsty for the Palestinian narrative. I've only had two really negative experiences. Actually, last week a Jewish school invited me to talk to their students about my books, and then 1 week later emailed very concerned that I might be political in my talks, and could I give them a reassurance that I wouldn't be political. And I wrote back and I said, I respect the fact that it's up to you who you want to invite, but there's no way that I'm going to censor myself. This is part of my identity, and being Palestinian is necessarily being political, because politics isn't just something you see on the news, it's part of your life. And they sort of cancelled the booking.
I'm surprised they even invited you.
Yeah, I was very surprised. And they said, well, for me what was so interesting was it wasn't a blanket cancellation. It was, what we'll do is we'll cancel this event and then we'll organise a panel discussion for another event. So again, it's the idea that your view must be balanced by the equal valid Jewish view.
Eileen, have you come across this prejudice?
Well, to the contrary, a little bit actually. For the last 2 years, the Queensland History Teachers Association has invited me to come and speak specifically about Middle Eastern or Palestinian issues. And this year they in fact invited, I was the keynote speaker last year. This year they asked me to speak again, but they had Anthony Lowenstein as the keynote speaker. Yeah, so clearly they want to get a message across to all their history teachers that Palestine is an important issue that needs to be discussed in the classroom. And every couple of weeks I'm invited to another high school to speak to groups of senior students about the Israel-Palestine issue without any, balancing of it. It's just me and that's it.
Actually, sorry to hog it, but Palestine I'm so passionate about. Last thing, one of for me the most gratifying aspects of my career as a writer was that Where the Streets Had a Name, which is my book based in Palestine about the occupation from a young girl's perspective. It was voted most popular book among young readers, but it was voted by young readers in Australia, and for me that really showed a shift that the adults might not be getting it right in terms of censorship, but young people can see through all of that and actually want to hear about that story.
So, Mark, do you have to have experienced something to write poetry about, to write passionately about?
I think
Can you write it as an outsider?
I think it helps. You can always empathise. Empathy is a human trait that we all have. And of course it does help. I go back to an experience where I had a run-in with a particular individual who called me a terrorist. And that's one of my best poems because it comes out in passion. Because if someone calls you a terrorist, you absolutely rip at them. But you learn not to do that because we do get those negative impacts so many times. But this particular time, this guy actually had a 10-year-old kid with him, and he's teaching these ideals and these values to the next generation. So those experiences, those unique experiences that we face, whether that's because we're Muslim, the colour of our skin, the way that we look, or my giant height, it all adds to the fact that you can represent your unique experience through your art.
The audience, everybody wants to participate, you'll go well, learning things.
I think you're just doing that good a job and I can't remember to do.
Tony Jones got on the way. Rhonda, how was your experience on Tony Jones on Q&A? Actually, I must admit, last time we met, I wanted to have a go at you about that, and I'll bring it up again today. On the Q&A program, Tony asked you about same-sex marriage, I believe. And you said at the time that it wasn't. It was a secular issue. Your voice wasn't overly important.
No, I didn't say that.
You did, sort of like that. And then you did say in the end that as also I don't agree with it. However, it's. I think it was more or less. To me, it just sort of. You sort of just dismissed it to say, well, it's Muslim. I really don't have an opinion on it. And I felt a little bit. Well, I just didn't understand why your voice wasn't as valid as the next person sitting next to you. Why you didn't think it wasn't valid.
I think that's an interesting interpretation. No, I did start by saying that as a Muslim, my position is homosexuality is a sin, and I did say that. And then I said that, and I believe this, in a secular state, I can't dictate to other people how they should live their life. And I see an incompatibility in a secular democratic state between allowing or prohibiting same-sex marriage and my Muslim views. But at the same time, I did acknowledge that as a Muslim, I disagree with that.
Okay, then are you suggesting that as a Muslim, your views then aren't worthwhile or valid? I mean, in a secular society, then aren't we all able to express our views and to...
That's what I said. I said having that viewpoint is different to legislating.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the point that I made. Just because you are able to make that distinction, I don't think it means that a Muslim opinion in a secular society is any less valid. It is a position and a valid and equal position to any other position. But at the end of the day, it's about at what point can you legislate on something because of a religious belief. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that. But the way I said it, it's not so black and white.
Marlene, how do we as a community engage ourselves with the everyday narrative? I mean, I get a phone call quite often from various media, this Muslim issue. What's your opinion on it? They never ring me and say, well, the boat's gone over in the harbour, there's an oil spill. What's your opinion on that? So obviously I don't have an opinion outside of a Muslim opinion. How do we engage more in the everyday narrative?
There are some people that do a good job. I mean, Waleed Ali, I think, has transcended, just being able to speak about Muslim issues, to speak about, every other issue. I think that it's how we position ourselves and how the media views us. I think we've got to start, like Amal, writes about things that have, nothing to do per se with Islam or Muslims. We're under the same. And so once we start to do more of that, we'll start to be seen as just part of the Australian, cultural fabric that has an opinion on a whole range of things that may have nothing to do with religion or Islam or Muslims. And I think that's how we need to be more engaged, I think, and then our opinions will be sought out because they're valid opinions and they contribute something to the discussion, irrespective of what personal faith we might have.
And are the next generation engaged? Rhonda, you're obviously dealing a lot with the next generation. Are they engaged? Are they engaging? Do they want to be engaged?
I think so. I think that from the time when I was growing up, it was just about surviving as an Aussie Muslim. I grew up at the time of the First Gulf War, and there's a real obvious shift in the way that Muslims and Arabs were represented in the media. So I think it was just a matter of survival, and some people became more hardcore in their identity, and others sort of retreated to that safety of anonymity and repressed and suppressed their identity. But I think that, like everyone said, it's a generation shift as well. I don't know, what do you think?
I don't think it's just engagement. I think they're actually driving change. So I'm amazed at the new generation of uni students. They're so much more active than I ever was. I was very late to the game. I didn't have their determination and courage. And maybe we opened the doors for them a little bit, I'm not sure. But I see so many of them working for SBS and ABC, wearing hijab or not wearing hijab. Amazing, organising, what do you call those protests? The on the spot, what are they? Flash mobs. That's it. Sorry. Yes, they're organising flash mobs for Syria and Palestine. Really wonderfully done, professionally done, up on YouTube, 70,000 views, whatever. They're awesome. They're gonna make the change that we need. So yeah, I'm not worried.
Any feedback from the audience? No questions? Everyone's answered everything? Asked all the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening intently. Thank you to my panel. We'll go out to Zohar doing another, what was his name?
Do the terrorist one.
Do the terrorist? Am I doing the terrorist one? Yeah, thank you. He said, "Go back to where you came from, you dirty terrorist." He called me a dirty terrorist. But to be honest, this isn't the first time I've heard this. I'm used to such abuse. I've learned to pick and choose what I listen to. But this was new. This time, this middle-aged man held in his hand the hand of his 10-year-old son. Now, I'm not one to tell someone how to raise their seed, but this made my soul bleed black, boiling blood for when I have a son. I'm going to teach him love. I'm going to teach him respect and acceptance for all creatures in existence. But this man, he didn't seem to understand that his wicked words would manifest in the chest of his son, leaving him with a hate-filled heart. He'll go to school with his school back just like Dad and call that Kit Kat brown kid a dirty Arab. And trust me, you should say that. With my frame of mind and a mind frame where I'm a name ashamed of racist, terrorist, and perplexed, for 4 minutes I waged war with my words. My lyrical jihad was heard down every street in Wagga. My poem of mass destruction caused destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki proportions. People, please proceed with caution. Well, I rock no suicide vest, but I assure you a bomb lies inside this chest. Ready for love explosions of the most poetic kind. I am a terrorist of the mind, spreading extremist ideals of peace, love, harmony, one poem at a time. So when I rhyme not to be heard, but to be heard. What?
Zohar, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel for being here. Dr. Helen Ray, Zohar, Amal Awar, and Randa Abdul Fattah. We'll be back at 4:30 for our second panel. In the meantime, we'll have a breakout session. Please look at the